Java Server Faces offers a number of very powerful, easy-to-use components for the user interface. However, there may be times when the built-in components don't precisely fit your design specifications. Instead, you might decide to create custom components that extend or modify the basic components in some way. There are two ways in which components can be customized. First, users can extend the standard components to modify how they function or what the capabilities are. And second, users can actually separate the definition of a component from its appearance by using customized renderers. You can even create multiple renderers for a single component and then render it in a different way depending on the client device. Let's create a new custom component within the framework of the application created in Chapter 2. We start by creating a new Java class to contain the customized component. Right-click on the source folder, choose New, and then choose to create a standard Java class. We can name this whatever we want, so I'll just call this component. To be a component, this class must extend the javax.faces.component.ui component base class, so we can add that to the class name. Once we add this to the component, Java will note that an extension to UI component base must implement the method getFamily. So I'll choose to add unimplemented methods and put that in the code. The UI component base is obviously the most generic component implementation, so if your goal is to create a component that is closely related to a component that already exists, then you could instead extend a class in the javax.faces.component package that represents one of the other standard components. Where you go from here largely depends on what you intend to do with your component, but there are a number of common options. The javax.faces.component package includes several behavioral interfaces that can provide components with certain powers as follows. The action source interface allows components to fire an action, which is defined by the javax.faces.event.actionEvent class. The action source 2 interface extends this to include the capability to handle more complicated action events. These events might include actions that involve method expressions, which provide them with additional customizable features. The naming container interface, on the other hand, is primarily an organizational tool. Rather than providing additional powers, it adds a constraint. Every component that has this component as a parent must have a unique ID. If it is important for your code to be well documented and you intend to reference components in the future, it's a good idea to add this interface simply to act as a reminder that all components must have a unique ID. Value holder and its extension editable value holder both allow the component to store local data. This is a great way to improve efficiency because the component will not have to access an external data source each time. Having local copies of data also makes parallelism easier to achieve because you don't have to worry as much about read/write conflicts. Finally, every component by default implements the state holder interface. This behavioral interface applies the very basic requirement that the component has a state, and that state must be saved between requests. The behavioral interfaces that you choose to implement will depend on the specification for your custom component. If your component is based off of the UI component base, then it will only need to implement the state holder interface. If your component is based off of one of the standard components, then it might also need to implement others of these behavioral interfaces. For instance, UI output automatically implements value holder, while UI input automatically implements editable value holder, which in turn implements value holder as well. I mentioned earlier that it is possible to delegate the rendering of a custom component class to separate the appearance from the backend code. The way to do this is to use the method that we were forced to implement when we extended UI component base, the getFamily method. Basically, if you have a custom renderer in your application configuration resource file, you can refer to it here using this method. Just modify the return statement to return the name of the custom renderer as a string, and the method will automatically look it up. That's the basics of customizing your Java servlet components. Whether you want to change how the backend code of the component functions or add customized rendering options, Java servlets will make this easy.